The first time she looked at us, I knew exactly what kind of flight this was going to be. That half smile, tight, polite, and absolutely dripping with judgment, was all I needed to see. I was traveling with my best friend, Jasmine. We'd been planning this trip for months. First-class seats, a much-needed vacation, and a promise to ourselves that for once, we'd treat ourselves like we belonged there. The cabin smelled of coffee and perfume, the soft hum of engines filling the air. The other passengers were still settling in, briefcases snapping shut, seatbelts clicking, the low murmur of small talk. And then, there was her, tall, blonde, early 40s, the kind of person who announces authority without saying a word. The flight attendant. Her name tag said Cheryl. When she reached our row, she paused like she'd stumbled into the wrong neighborhood. "Are you sure you're in the right seats?" she asked, eyes flicking between us and her manifest. I smiled. "Pretty sure. 2A and 2B, right?" I held up the boarding pass. Cheryl leaned in, scanned the ticket as if expecting it to dissolve in her hand. "Huh," she said, lips curling. "Well, okay then. Just don't block the aisle, please." The man behind us chuckled under his breath. Jasmine's jaw tightened. I could feel her pulse from the way her arms stiffened on the armrest. We tried to brush it off, but Cheryl wasn't done. Minutes later, she came back with champagne, handed glasses to everyone in the cabin except us. I watched her pour, laugh, and chat with a couple across the aisle before skipping right over our row like we were invisible. "Excuse me," Jasmine said, calm but firm. "Could we get ours?" Cheryl blinked at her, feigning surprise. "Oh, we don't usually serve pre-departure drinks to passengers boarding late." We hadn't boarded late. We were one of the first on. Jasmine shot me a look that said let it go, but I could feel the heat rising in my chest. The woman in front of us turned slightly, her brow furrowed, clearly having noticed. I leaned closer to Jasmine and whispered, "If Karma's boarding this flight, she better buckle up." But right then, something caught my attention. Cheryl was talking quietly to the pilot just beyond the curtain, eyes darting toward us, voice sharp and fast. The pilot's brows lifted. He looked our way, and then Cheryl disappeared back into the galley with that same smug smirk. Something was definitely about to happen. I knew something was off the moment Cheryl reappeared. Clipboard in hand, posture stiff, her fake smile polished to perfection. The kind of smile that usually comes right before someone says something you'll remember for all the wrong reasons. She stopped at our seats again. "Ladies," she began, "we've received a report that someone from this section attempted to access restricted compartments during boarding." My jaw literally dropped. "Excuse me," I said, half laughing because it sounded insane. "We've been sitting here the entire time." Her tone sharpened. "I'm just doing my job. Security is a very serious matter." I could feel the entire cabin's attention turn toward us, heads subtly turning, whispers fluttering through the air. Jasmine shifted in her seat, voice low but firm. "Ma'am, nobody touched anything. We're just here minding our business." But Cheryl wasn't listening. She turned slightly, projecting her voice now, clearly performing for the nearby passengers. "If there's been a misunderstanding, we'll sort it out before takeoff," she said with the same fake calm teachers use before handing out detentions. Jasmine shot me a look that said, "Don't let her get away with this." So I pulled out my phone, slowly, deliberately, and started recording. That did it. Cheryl's entire expression cracked, her eyes narrowing like she'd just been caught doing something she wasn't supposed to. "Ma'am," she hissed, stepping closer. "You cannot record airline staff without consent." "Oh, I'm not recording airline staff," I said sweetly. "I'm recording myself, documenting the moment a flight attendant falsely accused us of something because she couldn't stand seeing two black women in first class." The man across the aisle, the one who'd been silent earlier, suddenly cleared his throat. "Actually," he said, "I saw them sitting there the whole time. Nobody touched anything." A few nods followed from nearby passengers. One woman even said, "That's ridiculous." Cheryl froze, realizing the tide had turned. For a split second, her face betrayed something. Panic, guilt, maybe both. But she quickly recovered and snapped, "Fine, let's just keep things professional, all right?" She turned on her heel and stormed toward the galley, the click of her heels sharp against the aisle floor. I leaned back, heart still pounding. Jasmine exhaled shakily and whispered, "You think that's the end of it?" I glanced at the curtain she'd disappeared behind and shook my head. "No, People like her never end things quietly. I didn't know it yet, but Cheryl was about to make things much, much worse, and Karma was already taxiing onto the runway. 10 minutes into the flight, the seatbelt sign blinked off, and the cabin relaxed into quiet conversation and the faint clink of cutlery. Jasmine leaned toward me, whispering, "Think she'll actually serve us this time?" Before I could answer, Cheryl emerged from the galley, tray in hand, mask of politeness firmly back in place. She smiled, all teeth and tension. "Can I offer you something to drink?" Her tone was sweet enough to rot the metal off the cart. Jasmine hesitated, but I met Cheryl's gaze head on. "Sure," I said calmly. "Champagne, please. Since we're not late anymore." That one landed. Her jaw flexed before she forced the smile back into place. She poured the drink, just a little too aggressively, and handed it over. "Enjoy," she said flatly, then wheeled the cart down the aisle without another word. We tried to shake it off, but the atmosphere in first class felt charged, like everyone knew something had happened and was waiting to see what came next. The plane hit a small bump, then another. Turbulence, light but persistent. Cheryl came on the intercom, her voice tight. "Flight attendants, take your seats." Except she didn't. She walked down the aisle again, steadying herself on seats, trying to look busy. A few rows behind us, an older man suddenly groaned. His hand clutched at his chest. The woman beside him screamed, "Help! He's having a heart attack!" Chaos erupted. Cheryl froze, eyes wide. Passengers started shouting for help, and I could see it. She didn't know what to do, completely paralyzed. Another attendant rushed up from economy, already grabbing the defibrillator, calling for the medical kit. "Ma'am, move!" the younger attendant shouted at Cheryl, trying to squeeze past. Cheryl just stood there, blocking the aisle. Her hands were trembling. I'll call the captain," she stammered, backing up. Jasmine and I immediately unbuckled and stood. I had basic first aid training. Nothing fancy, but enough. I grabbed the AED bag from the cart the other attendant was struggling to open and helped set it up. The whole first-class cabin was silent, except for the sound of instructions from the AED and the woman crying beside her husband. Within minutes, the man began to breathe again. The younger flight attendant looked shaken but grateful. "Thank you," she whispered to me, tears in her eyes. I turned, breathless, and saw Cheryl standing near the curtain, pale, eyes glassy, her authority shattered. The captain's voice came over the speaker. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're making an emergency landing in Denver. Medical personnel will meet us on arrival." As I sat back down, hands still shaking, Jasmine murmured, "You just saved that man's life." I looked toward Cheryl, who couldn't meet my gaze. For the first time, she looked small, human even, but drenched in shame. And somehow I knew Karma wasn't done yet. The wheels hit the runway with a jolt, the entire cabin bouncing slightly before settling into that heavy silence that follows adrenaline. As we taxied toward the gate, paramedics waited just outside, ready to board. The older man was conscious now, pale but alive. Passengers began to murmur words of relief. A few even turned to thank me as I helped his wife gather their things. Jasmine squeezed my hand under the tray table, whispering, "You did good, girl." And then I saw Cheryl. She was standing near the galley again, straightening her uniform like nothing had happened. But the illusion was gone. The same passengers she'd once smirked at now avoided her gaze. The younger attendant who'd helped with the medical emergency brushed past her without a word. The captain finally stepped out of the cockpit, calm but firm. "Who performed the AED procedure?" he asked. The younger attendant pointed to me. "She did. Passenger in 2A. The captain nodded, grateful. "You probably saved a life today. Thank you." Then his tone shifted. Polite, but unmistakably cool. He turned towards Cheryl. "You failed to respond to a medical emergency and obstructed the aisle during protocol. We'll be documenting this." You could almost hear her breath catch. "Captain, I was trying to..." But he cut her off. "This isn't the time." Passengers watched in silence as he walked away. Cheryl just stood there, eyes glassy, clutching her clipboard like a shield. When the paramedics finally cleared the scene and passengers began to disembark, I gathered my bag and stood. As I passed Cheryl, she whispered, "I'm sorry." I paused, not out of anger, but disbelief. The same woman who had questioned whether I even belonged there was now struggling to hold back tears. I didn't say much, just looked at her and replied quietly, "It's never too late to see people for who they are, not what you expect them to be." And then I walked away. Out in the terminal, Jasmine was still processing it all. "You think she'll keep her job?" she asked. I shrugged, adjusting my bag. "Maybe. But even if she does, she'll remember this flight every time she looks at a boarding pass, and maybe next time she'll think twice before deciding who deserves to sit where." We stopped at the window, watching the plane as the sun cut across the tarmac, a slant of gold against steel. The moment felt surreal. Jasmine smiled. "So, still feel like we don't belong in first class?" I laughed softly. "Nope, we earned every damn mile." As we walked toward baggage claim, I caught one last glimpse of Cheryl through the glass, sitting alone inside the plane, head in her hands. Karma had landed, right on time. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It helps me share more real-life karma stories like this one. And hey, drop a like if you believe respect should always fly first class. See you in the next story.